Hello YouTube, Ken Hao here with another Black Desert Online video, and today I'm going to show you my guide to Guardian Awakening, just in time for the Guardian Awakening release outside of Korea. So I already released an overview of the skills a couple of days ago, maybe sometime early this week or last week. So if you want to check that out, the in-depth skill overview, you can check that video. This is just going to be the skills I choose on Awakening and Pre-Awakening, and how to weave in and out of the two, and whether or not I think that's a good idea, and other little things like that that I think you should be aware of when you start playing your Guardian in Awakening. Alright, so without any more of that shenanigans, let's get this video started. Alright, so we're here in Gypinraza, or Gypinraza, or whatever you want to call it, with the Guardian in Awakening. So let's look here at the skills I choose. Let's begin with that. Why not? And you see that I maxed most of my skills here. I have a back and left click. I have my shift and F maxed out. I have the shift and left click, which is the holding charging skill. And then I have my shift Q, which is a very good skill, very important skill in grinding. And then I have my shift and left click also maxed out with the flow. And then I did not pick the right click skill because I have not found a good way to use it. It's not protected or anything like that, so I don't suggest that you choose it unless you have spare skill points that you're dying to use and you want to see if you can fit the skill in somehow. Then I got the charge, which you do need to max out your pre-awakening charge to get this one, so keep that in mind. And you have the spacebar skill. This is very important skill, and we'll talk about it why. Then you have the F, which is a stun, not a lot of damage, but it's a quick jab and allows you to cancel out of some things and get you moving faster. Then you have the very popular Phoenix dive bomb, or dragon dive bomb, whatever you want to call it. Then I got the slide, which is pretty cool. And then you have the flow for the charging shift and left click skill. So I did not max this out. This is your back and right click. I've been reconsidering. I might be putting some extra points into this. I'm still debating, because it does have pretty good range, so it might be good to hit some mobs a little far away. And it does have a float, so if somebody's trying to run away from you in PvP or something, you might be able to catch them and send them flying. But I haven't missed it. There's enough skills, and the cooldowns and the awakening skills are short enough that you can keep going without this skill. I also have not taken the grab yet. I will take it eventually. I am actually investing on the pre-awakening grab, which is also need to max out so that you can take this. Once I have enough points, I'll grab it, but not yet. It's not very useful for me. Then you have, of course, the buff, the awakening buff, very good. Definitely should have that. And as far as pre-awakening, honestly, I can't really recommend much because I'm not using the pre-awakening. Like I said, the cooldown on the awakening skills is short enough that I don't feel the need to be switching to fill in spaces with pre-awakening skills. But if you are going to, you should probably choose the two jumps, the forward and right click, and the forward and Q are two of the skills that you can use to get back into pre-awakening once you are in awakening. And I can show you those right here. So I'm in awakening right now, and if I do forward and Q, you will bring the axe, the little axe, back out so they can change back to pre-awakening. And the forward or W and right click only works if your awakening forward and right click is on cooldown. So if you use this one, which is the forward and right click in awakening, and then you do it again, forward and right click, you do this skill. So if you're trying to grind quickly and switch from mob to mob, these are two skills that let you kind of move around a little faster than just running, which is what you might find yourself doing a lot as a guardian. So you can do this to kill one mob, one group of mobs, and then you can go ahead and do it again, this one, to kill the next group of mobs. And then you're going to be in pre-awakening, so you can use the pre-awakening mobility. The awakening kit really only has one efficient mobility skill, which is the charge forward, or W and F, which is this one here. And it does have a shorter cooldown than the pre-awakening charge. The other mobility skill that you have is this slide. You can go like this, and you can combine it with the dodge. The dodge, which is shift and movements, the movement keys, does give you a little buff for running speed, 10% running speed for 10 seconds. So if you do this and then this, you move a little farther, faster, and you have a running buff that you can keep up at all times. Right, we talked about how to get from awakening to pre-awakening. Now let me show you how to get from pre-awakening back into awakening. And there are mainly three ways they can do that, as far as I know. So one way is your dash, which is your forward, and F. You can see she brings out the big axe. And let me show this again. Right, so you have a little axe, and then you put forward and F, and you change back into Awakening. The other way is to use your Phoenix Dive Bomb. You can see there, I just changed back into Awakening. And the other way, of course, is your, if you hotkey your spacebar, you can use it to go back into Awakening, like this. Now, the other mobility skill is the Phoenix Dive Bomb, but unfortunately this skill is on an 18-second cooldown, which is pretty terrible. You do it like this, and it gets a little far, but like as you can see here, the cooldown is pretty ridiculous. By the time you finish the animation, you are still waiting for 15 seconds. So most of the time, you're going to be using the charge, which is with a 7-second cooldown or 8-second cooldown. The one cool thing that you can do is that you can chain the Phoenix with the charge, right? So you can do forward and or W and F, and then before the end, you can do back and F, and you can combine the two together, and you don't get the slow windy animation for the Phoenix or Dragon Dive Bomb. You can also cancel this skill with the spacebar skill, and the cool thing about that is that if you put that skill, the spacebar skill, on your hotbar like I have here, you can actually use that to switch it from pre-awakening back to awakening, right? So you're swinging, if you're swinging your axe in pre-awakening like this, and then you can hit your hotkey skill here, in my case it's 1, and then you can switch awakening, and then you chain that with the Phoenix Dive Bomb, and now you can start hitting things with your bigger and better axe. As far as combos go, I haven't found any combos really as that are lengthy as the ones that I used or that I showed in my pre-awakening video. But the skills that are important that you use, of course, are the ones that will give you buffs and the ones that keep you from being CC'd, right? And unfortunately, in Awakening, she has fewer skills that give her protection while she's casting them. So you're gonna have to be a little more careful than you were in pre-awakening with the Guardian. The good news is that the skills that do have super armor have a very short cooldown. So for the most part, if you're a little careful, you should be able to stay protected the whole time. For example, the Shift and F, which is a skill that I use a lot, and that you should be using a lot as well, because it gives you accuracy buff and reduces the enemy attack by 20. This skill has a super armor. It's a 6-second cooldown, so we can use it quite often. And your other skill that has protection is the Shift and Left click, which is has frontal guard, so you have to be a little careful. You might have to jump and to reposition yourself. And then this skill, which is a Shift Q, is on an 8-second cooldown, but the animation is pretty long, so by the time you finish using it, the cooldown will be almost over, and you get super armor for the duration. Let me show you here what it looks like. Shift Q, you can see it's still using, and by the time you use this skill, you are about 5 seconds. Another reason why the spacebar is very good is because it allows you to use your Shift Q quicker. And the strange thing though is that the game tries to squeeze it at the end of your Shift Q. If you hold Shift Q, you use the Shift Q skill, and then you add the vacuum at the end as a flow, even if you don't hit the spacebar, right? But the thing is, you actually want to use the spacebar before, so that you can use the Shift Q skill faster, and it looks like this. Well, let me first show you the Shift Q without the spacebar, so you can see how slow the animation is, and you can make a comparison here. So you see it's slow, just like the Phoenix. She smashes her poleaxe on the ground and then hits the enemies with a fire. But if you use your spacebar, so boom, and the slam comes out a lot faster. So like I said, the skills that you should be using constantly here are the super armor, the protection skills, and luckily they are also the skills that will give you buffs and debuffs on the enemy. So your Shift F is very important, your Shift Q is very important, and the Shift Q is also a pretty good heal, so it's very useful. He also gets a DP debuff on the enemy, right? So you get AP debuff here plus accuracy buff for the Shift and F. Then the Shift Q will give the enemy a 20 DP debuff and you heal you. And then your Shift and Left click will also reduce 20 DP. So clearly you should not be using these one after the other because it won't stack, but it's good to know that you can keep these debuff up on the enemy. This is a stun. I use the F mostly to cancel out of things, especially the teleport. If you jump around and you teleport, and you can hit your F to get out the animation a little quicker, or the slam at the end. And the other skill that you want to be using a lot, like I said, is the spacebar skill, which is a 20 AP buff. The other skill is this, just a follow-up to the shift and left click. It's a good skill, it's a lot of damage, but nothing special about it. Then you have your slide here, which offers super armor and iframe, and it's decent damage, and it gives a lot of back attacks because you teleport behind the enemy. So it's a good little burst, and mobility allows you to switch from groups and reposition yourself. Yeah, these are your main skills here: the shift and F, the shift and Q, the shift and left click, the shift and right click, and then your right click and forward, or W, your flow to shift left click, your flow to shift right click, and then of course your charge, very important to get around. Right, and then eventually you want to get a grab, of course. The other skill that I have maxed out here, which I haven't used in quite a while, I'm having trouble remembering to use this because I don't feel the class is as clunky as initially thought. So I've been able to deal with the attack speed without using this skill, but this skill is pretty cool because it gives you a 10-second buff to your attack speed, 20% attack buff, so it makes your attack quite a bit faster. And it's you just have to hit the enemy once to get the buff. So if you do back and left click, you can see I immediately get the buff here, 20% attack speed. So it's a good buff. I just had to get good, I suppose, and remember to use the skill, because I forget all the time. The other thing you can notice here, I don't know if you probably notice as I hit the enemies, you still keep your dragon buff here, so you still do not have to worry too much about crit crystals, because you will be critting constantly. The skills that I recommended you use, you see here, this one actually doesn't have any crit chance built in, but you know, because of your passive, you start, or your, some people got confused about when I say passive before. So when I say passive that gives a crit chance, of course I'm talking about this one here, so keep that in mind. She does get a passive down here that gives you crit damage, right? This is your crit damage passive, and then she has a passive skill, which I call it passive because you don't have to do anything, you just have to hit enemies for it to cast, or to be effect, to take effect. So it's also a passive. It gives you a max at 10 stacks, you get 50% crit chance. This skill's got the shift and right click has a 50% crit chance. This skill, the shift Q, has 50% crit chance. This shift and left click has a 100% crit chance, another 100% crit chance. This teleport does not have any crit chance. The Phoenix does not have crit chance, and the spacebar skill does have 50% crit chance. So I would say at least half of your skills will have 100%, more than half of your skills will have 100% crit damage all the time, and the ones that don't, like this one, will still have 50% crit. So if you don't have crit crystals right now, it's not a big deal, especially because you can get crit buffs quite easily from food. What I'm saying is you don't have to go out of your way to get your sheet crit maxed out. As you can see, I only have 2. So with my food buff, I can get to 4 or 5 quite easily. So yeah, like I said, I haven't made changes to the pre-awakening skill set because the awakening skills are very powerful, and their cooldown is short enough that I don't feel like I need any extra skills to fill in the gaps. So as far as skill points go, once you hit level 56, you can just drop them all into your awakening skills and not worry about it, in my opinion. Like I said before, the only reason why you would go back to pre-awakening right now is for the mobility, or of course if you need the heal from the shift Q. That's one skill that you should take, I suppose. If you need a heal in the pinch, you can use your shift Q to heal yourself. It's a pretty good heal. It's slow, right? I wouldn't recommend to try to heal yourself back with this skill if you're PvPing 3 or 4 people, or even just another person, because you're gonna probably get killed before you can get healed. But if you finish the battle and before you start a new one, you need a refresher, right? You can just hit and hold your shift Q and heal yourself. Also good if you're in the desert to heal that debuff. The one thing I've been considering doing is actually lock the forward and right click skill, because apparently I need to get good and watch my cooldowns, because I use my slide all the time and then I want to use it again, but if it's on cooldown, like I said before, you're gonna switch to pre-awakening. And it's kind of annoying, especially because this skill is the shift, the front and right click has a very slow ending there, where you're stuck in the ground for a bit. But you know, the shift right click is still a pretty good skill, pretty good damage skill, and you can follow up, of course, with the space bar for pre-awakening and get the little crit damage buff before you come back to awakening. So you get additional crit damage if you do something like this, and then like this, and then you can do the space bar skill, the awakening space bar skill, if you put on your hotkey bar here, like I said. And now you got an extra buff. So perhaps not a bad idea. If there was a smoother way to get back to awakening, then maybe that would be a better combo. But you know, this, like I said, it's good damage. You can do this, or you can do this, and then space bar, and then you're this one, and now you're back, and you had the crit buff that you had before, and now you have the other buffs as well. So the big difference between your awakening and pre-awakening shift Q skill is that the pre-awakening will heal you regardless of whether or not you hit enemies, but the awakening skill will only heal you if you hit enemies. But as far as the pre-awakening skills, like I said, you can take the shift Q for the heal. You need to take the grab, max the grab and max the charge, so that you can get the awakening grab and the awakening charge. This is probably what you should take first. Max out your pre-awakening charge so that you can get the awakening charge. And if you do PvP, I suppose, get max your grab as well, your pre-awakening grab, so that you can get the awakening grab. And then after that, get the shift Q so that you can get the heal. You should probably take at some point the forward in Q as well, because you might need to switch from awakening to pre-awakening using this skill, or this one, the forward and right click. But yeah, so these are your skills really that I recommend you taking for pre-awakening, but that's really only after you've maxed out your awakening skills, of course. That's for most classes. So yeah, this is all I have for you for now for my awakening guide. If I remember something else, I will post a comment down below, and pin a comment down below so you guys can see. But I think that's it for me for now. I'm gonna go ahead and let you go, and stay tuned for the next video. If you like this video, I appreciate if you can drop a like, and if you want to see more content from me, feel free to hit the subscribe button. I would appreciate it. It really helps. And if you want to join this community on Twitch and Discord, there are links down below they can check out, so join us there. All right, and other than that, I'm gonna get out of here, and I will see you on the next one. Take care.